Holly has come to Vero Beach. When did you come here, Holly?
Last year, last
Yeah.
October.
Right. And so she contacted me and said she's an avid birder and wants to get involved. And so she told me about lots of things about her, that she came from recently North Carolina, where she got her degree and a master's in what, Holly?
Environmental science.
Right. And you have been a birder since when?
I'd probably say like 2016. Like I knew a little bit about birds prior to that, but I really got into it in grad school with some pretty good professors.
Oh, wonderful. It's good to go out with people that are really passionate and can teach you lots about it.
For sure.
Right. And you have given talks before, and you're working now for the Florida Wildlife Service.
I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Okay.
Yes.
And you're kind of wanting to get outdoors. And so we plotted that maybe we have a way to get outdoors. And this is the first step. And I'm so glad some of you who have taken my class are getting involved, because eBird is essential to really learning lots more about birds. Plus, you certainly contribute to others too. But Holly's going to show you exactly what you can learn and why it's so valuable and how to do it. So without further ado, Holly, why don't you take it away?
Okay, so tonight I'm going to be talking to you guys about eBird and some other birding apps that I've found to be extremely useful. So the main ones I'm going to be focusing on are eBird and Merlin. They were both developed by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they help with bird identification and logging those observations of birds. eBird's going to be the first one that I'm talking about. eBird is a website, and they also have an app, but it allows people all over the world to log their observations of birds. They can also add photos and sounds. It's the world's largest biodiversity related citizen science project, and there's over 500 million sightings logged in eBird so far. As of this morning, I believe there was 54.2 million, and it just grows by the day. There's over 100 million sightings reported annually in eBird, and these observations allow people to understand bird movements and needs on large scales. It's available in every country. There are over 40 languages that you can use eBird in, and eBird can also be used for research, model creation, and informing conservation strategies, to name a few. So as of today, there have been 10,518 bird species identified on eBird, and that only leaves a couple hundred that have yet to be identified using eBird, and some of those are even extinct or potentially like critically endangered species. So who can use eBird? Basically anybody. So birders use it. It's made by birders for birders. Educators also use it. It's a good tool to help connect youth to the outdoors and understand science and nature. Researchers can use it as well. eBird observations have contributed to over 300 peer-reviewed publications. They can download raw data from the eBird websites for any other research, whether it's published or not. Conservationists use it as well. That same data can be applied to conservation efforts, including State of the Birds reports. Some other uses include research, monitoring, conservation planning, site and habitat management, habitat protection, and informing law and policy decisions. So eBird is very large scale and has multiple uses. eBird Science is part of their website. You can see abundance and trends. And I'm actually going to go to their website to show you what it looks like for the yellow-rumped warbler and what this picture here means. well, this one's for the wood duck, but let me show you what it's like for the yellow-rumped warbler. So this is the eBird science part of their webpage. And here you can look up by species. So I mentioned earlier, I was going to look up the yellow-rumped warbler. So I'll type it in here, and you have to forgive me for typing slow. I have a broken hand, but I'm doing my best. And once we go to this website, it'll show a lot of information about the species, including abundance, trends, habitat, and range maps. And one tool that I think is particularly cool is the abundance animation. So it'll tell you when certain species are going to be there, or like in what proportion during what time of the year. And over here, you'll see the different abbreviations for the months. So as it plays, you'll see that little indicator right here move. So you see the yellow-rumped warblers are migrating up towards the summer, and then they come back south and east for winter, which is where we see a lot of them here. And you can do this for many, many species. So if you're ever curious what a certain species is doing, this is a good place to look for that. And you can see purple is where they have the highest abundance, but they're not as abundant in the yellow areas. Data from eBird have been used to list species as threatened, conserve ecologically important regions, visualize relationships between bird species and the environment, create breeding bird atlases, and more. So like I said before, it's a very important tool for conservation, and there are just so many uses. And as it's becoming bigger, it's growing, like so many more people are using it. So sky's the limit really with how much you can do with this. The Explore tool, I think, is one of the coolest tools that eBird has, and I use all the time. There are two different types of things you can use in the Explore tool. You can use Explore Species or Explore Region, and I'm going to talk about both. The first one being Explore Species, and the species I'm going to highlight here is the Roseate Spoonbill. And say I'm curious about where I can find this bird. As you know, in Florida, we can see it a lot more often than you can in other states. It was a rarity in North Carolina, where I just came from. But we'll look at it on the Explore tool here. So here's what the Explore webpage looks like. You can see it's divided into Explore Species on the left and Explore Regions on the right, with a couple of other tools I'll talk about later at the bottom. So I told you I was going to look up Roseate Spoonbill under Explore Species. And I'll just click on it here. And this page will give me a lot of information about the bird. Here you can see different pictures, what they look like as juveniles versus adults. If you have this tied into your eBird account, it'll mark if you've seen it or not and record it on a list, or if you've taken a photo or any audio of it. Or even though I've seen it this year, I didn't put it on eBird list, otherwise that would be highlighted. It'll give you a little description of the bird, help you observe it. You can hear what it sounds like there. And then here, it'll give you some statistics and a weekly bar chart. But let's say I want to zoom in here to our area. Excuse my dog's barking. So the darker purple, the more common they are in that area. You can see Florida tends to be a very good spot to see them. I'll zoom in a little bit here to Vero. Because once you get really close, these purple squares will disappear, and they'll give you specific markers once it actually refreshes. Usually does, anyway. Or maybe they changed it. Anywho, you can also see media down here, different pictures people have taken, different audio recordings that people have put on their eBird list, and video. So you can do this for tons of different species. This is the data for the world, but if you want to enter a different region, you can put states, you can put like the US, you can put North America, anything like that. But when I type it in like that, it will just zoom into the particular state. And the bar chart will look a little bit different as you look at different species in different areas. So the other Explorer tool is the Explorer Region tool. And I wanted to look at Tucson, which is in Pima County, Arizona. And say if I'm wondering if I wanted to see a black-chinned hummingbird on my trip, I would go to this website and find out if it's been observed there or not. You can do this for any species, any area. If you're dying to see a certain bird species, this will be a good way to find out where you can see it. We'll go to the eBird homepage and you'll click on the Explore tool again. And we'll go to Explore Regions. And I wanted to look at Pima County, Arizona. I guess I just typed in Pima. And I can look through all of this and see if I can find that species there. And I can look at different species that have been reported there, when certain species have been found there, who the top birders are, if I'm really interested in that. But you can see that this list is pretty extensive, and you can see people's checklist if they have seen certain species. So there's a map of where certain observations are and how many different species have been seen there. So this particular area here looks like Sweetwater wetlands over there. They have a ton of different species. And if we wanted to click on that hotspot, the computer's attempting to load it. I have to try this again. But anyway, we'll go back to this. And there's a way here you can look and see in that certain area if you can find a certain species. But here's that, oops, the website has changed a little bit since I've last used it. But say I wanted to look for that black-chinned hummingbird, I can also go right here. And again, I can look at the range map like I did earlier. Or I could look at the data for the Pima County that Tucson's in. You can see that they are found there. And their bar chart looks a little bit different from how that other bird looked for Florida. So you can see if I wanted to go to Tucson to see this bird in particular, I'd want to go at a time of year when they're the most frequent. So we're seeing like 13 to like 15 or so % through here. So it looks like I'd want to go between like April and July if I want the best chance of seeing it. Because other than that, the frequency decreases. But I can also look over here again and see which areas might be better to see them. And I can look at individual people's checklists or look at different hotspots to see if it's been observed in that area. They also have a sensitive species policy to protect birds that could be affected by people showing up to see them. This could be a rare bird, whether it be threatened or endangered, or even like some nesting birds. And this will protect those species from illegal capture, targeted hunting, and disturbance. It kind of just leaves the birds at peace without risk of being disturbed by either birders who may genuinely just want to see them. Maybe it's a life bird for them or whatever, but there are unfortunately people who don't have the best intentions. This tool is really nice because it protects those birds from things that could be very bad for them. Even if you record the exact location of your checklist, when other people try to look for the species and where exactly it's found, it's not visible to them on eBird. It'll only be visible by the Cornell Lab ornithology team. And you don't have to worry about people. If you have your eBird set to public where people can see your list, you don't have to worry about other people using your list to go find that cool bird that you found. So going into checklist, here's a little bit of background on it. A checklist is just when you collect data about which birds you see. You record as a checklist in eBird. This is similar to keeping a field guide in person if you just write down which species that you see. This checklist will include the location, date, and the birds that you either saw or heard. For location, you can choose hotspots if they are available. If you remember on some of the eBird maps, you can see little pointers to certain areas, and some of those will show different colors if they're a hotspot. And hotspots are basically just places that have been really good for birders. It's a good spot to go to if you want to find certain things, and people use them a lot to log birds. But you can also create personal locations. Say if you bird in your backyard all the time, you can name your own personal location like my home, or whether it be like a certain other area, you can name it whatever you like. When you're making a checklist, eBird prefers that you use shorter lists, even if you have to create more checklists because of it. So say that you're driving around birding. If you're going like a far distance, that doesn't provide good location data for them. So they want you to use multiple, more small scale checklists so that that location data is more accurate. Because again, we've still got researchers and all kinds of other people using this data. So we want it to be as accurate as possible. So they recommend keeping the distance to 5 miles or less, or if you go into a new habitat, starting a new checklist. eBird Mobile, the app on your phone, it has a tracking option that will use your phone's GPS to create a path that you've traveled while you were logging data, which I find is really cool because I can go back and reference these later if I'm like, I want to hike this trail again, but I can't remember exactly which path I took to find this bird. I'll just look at this and can retrace my steps. I think it's also cool to see how far you go, because sometimes you get a little carried away birding and realize you went several miles and didn't even realize. There are different types of checklists that you can select when you're logging everything. Traveling is the first one. You use this when you're moving, whether it's hiking, driving, boating, anything like that. So as long as you're moving around, select this one. You can also select stationary, and that's when you're sitting still or barely moving. So say if you're backyard birding, then this would be a good option for you. And incidental, I don't recommend using as often. That's when birding was not your primary purpose or you're unable to record a full checklist. Incidental would be more so like, hey, I saw this bird and I think it's really important to log, but I don't have time to look at anything else right now. But if at all possible, eBird recommends creating a stationary checklist, even if you can just sit there for a couple minutes or so. Stationary data provides, it's more accurate for them than incidental. Historical, you can use if you're logging previous lists, or if you don't know the start time, duration, or distance. Say if you want to look at your old field journals and you want to have some of those species appear on your eBird list, this will be a good tool for you to use to upload that historical data. eBird's really cool too, because you can see the species count that you've seen like throughout your lifetime. And if you want to have some of those old species, it'll increase your number. When you're finished with your checklist, eBird will ask you, are you reporting all species? Yes will be when you identified everything that you're able to see or hear to the best of your ability, or no, you're intentionally leaving some of the species off the list. Sometimes people will omit things like gulls, rock pigeons, house sparrows, or common species and only report the cool stuff, but it's really better if you report everything. If you do go birding with other people, only one person has to submit a checklist. So you don't all have to log everything on your phone as you go. And if they have eBird accounts, you can share your checklist with other eBirders in your group. And whenever they log into their account, they can see the exact same checklist that you have without them ever having to do anything really. So that is also a very convenient tool. And it also helps eBird because it prevents duplicate data from being submitted. Sometimes you'll see something and you have no idea what it is, and it's hard to get started with that. I recommend either using an app such as Merlin, which I'll talk about in a bit. You can ask other birders, say if you're going with other people, to see what their thoughts are, see if you can narrow it down at all. I think another really convenient option is going to Facebook and using a What's This Bird group. You get a lot of experts in there who will reply to your post and help you identify the bird species, and you can update your checklist once you get a response from them. You can also ask people in local birding groups. Basically, just ask experts on the matter, and they should be able to help you at least narrow it down if they can't provide you with an accurate identification. But it's pretty rare, honestly, that you're not going to get an ID if you start digging into it and asking around. But once you get an answer, you can go ahead and log that into eBird. But if you can only get it narrowed down just a little bit, just try as best you can to log it when you go into eBird. Say if you know it was a gull, but you have no idea what type, you can put gull species, Empidonax species. Those are fly catchers, and they can be quite hard to identify unless you're really good at distinguishing their sounds. So you can put the Empidonax, and some of these other ones like peeps, crows, sharpshin, or coopers. If you can narrow it down that much, it's better than not having anything. For submitting your sightings, you first want to create an account, which many of you may have done already. But the next thing you'll want to do when you go into eBird is download the pack for your area. So for the Floridians watching this, you'll see that it detects your location. We'll see that Florida is, you can install it if you don't already have it installed, but it'll also offer other recommendations. If you want to do this in advance, if you're traveling to a certain area where you want to bird, you can go ahead and download the pack for that area in advance too. And this will help eBird show you the species that are likely to be seen in that area. So I'm going to walk you through what doing a checklist is like on your phone. This is what the app will look like when you pull it up. I made this last year, so the date's obviously different, but I will talk as it goes on. You can change the start time. If it was a little bit before. Record track will just show you that GPS log. You can click start checklist. And let's say I'm sitting in my yard here and I see a cardinal. So I'm going to start typing in cardinal, and I can either click there on the left and add to, or I can manually type it in there by clicking on the species name. I can add any comments. It could be distinguishing characteristics, whether it's an adult, juvenile, male, female, anything like that. Anything that you think is important there. And here's that list that it auto generates based on species that are common in the area. Another way to enter a bird species is by typing in the alpha code. You can see I typed in 2D for tufted titmouse. Alpha codes are generally the first two letters of the first part of the bird's name and the first two letters of the part of the last name. You can also type in, just say if I saw 2 Carolina chickadees, just type in 2 chickadees and it should pop up like that. You don't have to manually add the numbers each time. And let's say I saw a summer tanager as well. In that area, it showed up as infrequent. You can also add a breeding code. So these are some of the different types of breeding codes that can be used depending on the situation you saw the bird. But this bird in particular had been singing for a couple weeks, so I would log that. You can see these different colored circles beside each name. It'll tell you if it's infrequent, rare, anything like that. You can also add general comments for the entire checklist. This can include weather or any thoughts that you had about your whole birding experience. It's sorted taxonomically in general, but you can make it so that it shows rarities or not. I like keeping it turned off generally, in case I see one. But at the end, you'll want to click stop track. And this is the screen they'll come up with. We'll say that I birded for 5 minutes, but if you click the icon, it will auto-generate for you. If you were traveling, it will pop up on the right with miles. And this was a complete checklist and it was stationary, so I'll select that. And it will show me the species down at the bottom. And this was where I had birded at the time. So I clicked on the location at the top. If it shows a little bit inaccurate, you can drag it over to a more accurate position, and then you click submit, and then your checklist is done. So I'll go over there and click on my submitted checklist, and I can see everything that I reported is right there. And here's an example of another old list that I found. This was in Pennsylvania that I recorded, so I can see all the birds that I saw up there. And you can see I saw 30 different species. I was hiking for this one. There's my map of everywhere that I hiked around that park. There are 2 observers, and the duration is shown in minutes. And these are different areas that I had. This was in Onslow County, North Carolina, so it'll show me how many species that I've seen in that certain area per year and how many checklists that I've logged. And I can look for different region, like in North Carolina in general, that's how many species I logged in eBird. The app actually gives you a lot of options to look through what you've done in the past now. You can see more details about this online if you don't like looking at it on your phone. So reporting unusual birds. Sometimes a bird may be flagged when you enter in your list. So that'll happen when the species is rare for the place that you're at or the time of year that it is, or if the count you entered is unusually high. So if you log that into eBird, it'll show up with a notification, which I'll talk about in a second. So it kind of makes you question, are you confident that you saw that species? Which you very well could have. You either saw that rarity or you made a mistake and you might have to reevaluate, and that does happen. When you log that unusual sighting, the checklist will show an R in an orange square, if you remember seeing that when I was making the list before, or an exclamation point in an orange diamond next to the species name. And to submit your checklist, you're going to have to provide comments at the minimum if you report a rarity or high count. But you can log in online and add pictures or audio clips if you were able to capture that as well. When you do add comments for an unusual species, try to be as specific as you can. Regional eBird reviewers may follow up with you via email for more details regarding your observation. They do look through these checklists. If anything is flagged, they want to make sure that data is as accurate as possible before being formally submitted. So they want to verify that you've actually seen that bird. So they'll ask you for any specific details that you have, or if you have a picture. Pictures or sounds are honestly probably the best way to validate your identification. Because if they see a picture, they're bird experts really, and they can say, oh yeah, you're right, it's that bird, or sorry, that's not it. And they will update your checklist so that it doesn't make the data biased and incorrect. So again, if you can, try to provide a picture or audio clip. And I try to think of this as I'm birding. If I see something that's uncommon for that particular place, I try to pull out if I just have my cell phone, take a picture with that. If I have to try to take a picture through my binoculars, do that. If I'm lucky, I still have my camera, my DSLR camera on me, and can do it that way. But that would be the preferable method. But if you can't, just use as many details as possible. Like during the Christmas bird count in St. Lucie County, I saw a summer tanager, and we have them breeding up in North Carolina, so I recognized the song, and I knew that's exactly what it was, and I got a glimpse of the bird too, but it had flagged on my eBird list. So I provided as much data as I could, and they accepted it. But that's not always the case. I've also had email conversations with eBird reviewers and have had to either submit pictures or provide further details that way. So just be aware that could happen. When you go to add photos or sounds, you have to do it on the website at this point. Hopefully they will add that to the mobile app soon. But you have to log into your account and go to edit your checklist to add photos or sounds to your checklist. You can alter your checklist after they are submitted. You can alter it in the app, but you will have more functionality if you do it through the website. And like I said, it's the only way that you can add pictures or sound. Also, they do look through these pictures and stuff. So if you take a phenomenal picture, you might find it on their website someday. So when you go to your eBird, there are two options on eBird's website. You can go to My eBird, where you can manage your sightings, which would be managing your checklist like I just talked about, or managing your locations. Say if I bird all the time in certain areas like my home, I can name that area my home, or I can name particular other birding spots. You can also download your data from there and do a lot more. But if you go under my profile, you can see information about your sightings and edit your public or private profile. And I'm going to show you what both of these look like. So this one is My eBird, and this is what mine looks like. You can change your region to see the birds that you've seen in different areas. I have mine set to North America right now, but you can do it by states, counties, or like Western Hemisphere, even world, whatever you want to do. I'll close that out right now. I'll just leave it North America. It'll show you how many species you observed, how many checklists you've submitted, how many photos you've submitted, which I should probably upload more. And if you're on a streak, say if you've added a checklist for a certain number of days, it'll show you there. Has a little bit of a breakdown of the data here. And it'll show you your latest checklist over here to the right. And you can see how you've been doing over the years, like how many species that you've been seeing each year. And over here, you see you can manage your checklists, locations, alerts, data imports, contacts, or explore your profile or sightings or media. There are just a bunch of tools that you can really use here. But if I go over to my profile, I think it provides a cool visual representation. My profile set to public. Uh-oh, my internet's unstable, so hopefully y'all don't lose me. But this shows you the states that I've birded in or submitted eBird checklist in at least. It'll show you areas where I've only submitted a few checklists as to places where I've seen a lot of different birds there. So it's kind of cool when your map highlights a little bit more. I need to travel more. It'll show you your photos if you submitted any. I know we see a lot of sandhill cranes down here in Florida, but they're not common in North Carolina where I was. So I submitted pictures to validate my observation. But yeah, it's pretty cool if you like go into your latest checklist. Again, you can see my little trail that I hiked over here. We went to Bach Tower Gardens over in Polk County recently. And here are some of the birds I've seen. And even down here, you can see that this one flagged as sensitive, like I talked about earlier. So this wouldn't be visible with like the specific location that I saw those birds or heard those birds. I made a little note down here. And here you can see that I was traveling because I was hiking this. I submitted a complete checklist. That's how far I hiked. And that's how long I hiked and how many people were with me. So pretty cool tool if you want us to look at any of your past stuff or alter anything on your profile. Alerts and targets are other things that you can do on eBird. You can get rare bird alerts for when species are flagged as rare or seen. You can subscribe to it for certain areas. So if a rare bird is spotted, you want to go see it, you can go there and look at it if it's on public property. Otherwise, you have to ask for private landowner permission. And those will send to your email. You can also get needs alerts, which will show birds that you haven't reported in certain areas or for a certain periods of time, just to make sure that you're seeing a bunch of birds. Targets are when you're traveling to a new area and you want to see birds that you haven't already recorded. You can enter the region of interest, time of year, and list you want to learn more about. You will do this from ebird.org/explore, and you can either click target species or alerts. So I'll switch back over to you can click on explore from right here. And we'll want to scroll down. You can either hit target species. Let's say I'm going to Texas and I want to see how many species I haven't seen there. It's going to pop up with a bunch because I have not birded bunch in Texas and logged many birds there. But if I want to add it to my life list, then here are the birds that I'm going to have to look for. And you can do that for certain months as well if you alter the time of year. Alerts, you will click right here. And you can subscribe to alerts. Right now I'm subscribed to ABA, or I'm not subscribed, but I have the option to subscribe to ABA rarities. If you want to subscribe to rare bird alerts for a particular area, like say if I want to look for rare birds in Florida, I would enter that and click subscribe. So I entered that. So now I'd be subscribed to that. It'll send me a daily email. If I don't want the emails anymore, you can just easily unsubscribe. Needs alerts. Again, that's for species you haven't recorded in a particular area. So let's say I want to do those for Indian River County. So I click on that, and I could even do this year only if I wanted to, and click subscribe. Also, I wanted to show you guys something here before I move on. This is back on the Explore homepage with eBird. You can compare your totals with the top eBirders in your region. How many things have you submitted for your yard or different birding patches? Hotspots, which I talked about earlier. You can look for the best areas to go. So like say, for example, zoomed in really fast, but I want to see the hotspots in my area. I'll zoom into the map, or I can enter the hotspot up there, or even enter by location. And now you can see all those pins. And if I'm looking for a lot of birds, I'm probably going to want to go for a red or orange pin because that's where the most species have been observed. So here, for example, this is Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. And they again want more specific locations because that's a big area. So they would want smaller checklists, which is why this is probably showing with smaller hotspots that are just showing with orange because they're more specific to that area. So this would be a good tool to look at if you're traveling to a new area or you just want to find a new bird somewhere. It'd be a good idea to check out a hotspot before you go. You can even filter it by the past month or past week, see what's looking good. You can change the map, zoom tool. You can change it to the current year, all months, and go from there. So you use that tool for a lot of different things. So that's kind of an overview of eBird. There are so many different things that it can do, and this is just hitting the tip of the iceberg. If you want to learn more about it, there is a free course offered through Cornell's Bird Academy. It's this website here, and it will go over the essentials with eBird and how to use it. And it's a very user-friendly and informative course. If you haven't taken it and want to learn more about eBird, I definitely recommend it. I wanted to also talk about a few other birding apps that I use. Merlin, I use all the time. It's the other app by Cornell Lab of Ornithology. There's a link that you can type in on your phone to find the app, or just look in the App Store, Google Play, I believe it is, for Android devices. Merlin will help you identify over 6,000 species, North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. And in Merlin, you can use details about an observation or photo to help identify a bird that you saw. And it is based on data from observations logged in eBird. It will be customized to species that you're likely to have seen at your location or on the date that you observed the bird. So it won't be showing things that are potentially on the list, but they're not native to the area at all. So to use Merlin, create a Cornell Lab account if you haven't already. It'll be the same as your eBird account if you already made one of those. And you'll want to download packs for the area that you'll be visiting, just like you did with eBird. I made this one in Jacksonville, so I selected the US Southeast one. But you can also download a US and Canada one, continental. It's just going to show a lot more species. And when you're looking through trying to find a certain species, it may be harder to find what you're looking for in that particular area. You might see things that are like if say we're in Florida now and you're trying to figure out what a bird is, it'll show things in like California or Alaska, which won't really be useful to you unless it's a species that has that broad of a range. So I like keeping it tight. I use a US Southeast one a lot unless I'm traveling. So when you go into Merlin, this is what the home screen looks like. You can click Start Bird ID, Get Photo ID. It will make you download that separately, but it will still be part of the app. Or Explore Birds. I use Explore Birds all the time because I usually have some sort of suspicion over what I think something is if I can't figure it out, and I'll just type in different species that way. But if you want to start Bird ID, that big green icon on the lock screen, all you need to answer is 5 questions and it will lead you to the correct ID most of the time. First question is, where did you see the bird? So you can type in the place, zip code, you can click current location if you have your GPS working on your phone, or you can select it from a map. The second question is, it will ask is, when did you see the bird? As I'm walking through this, I have a particular bird in mind. I'm going to say I saw this one on Camp Lejeune, which is where I used to work. And we'll say that I saw this bird on July 2nd of last year. The third question it'll ask you is, what size was the bird? And as you click on different sizes, it'll describe it. Like the small one's sparrow, middle one's robin, crow, and then goose. And the ones in between, it'll just say between each of those species. So just get it as close as you can with the size. Particular bird that I saw was between sparrow and robin. Fourth question is, what were the main colors? So if it's just one color, you can pick one. If it's multiple colors, you can pick those. This particular bird has 3 different colors. By looking at the colors, you Floridians probably know what this is. So I'll click on next. The last question is the bird's behavior. Was the bird doing one of these things? And you'll select whatever you think it was doing. It will ask you if it's eating at a feeder, swimming or wading, on the ground, in trees or bushes, on a fence or wire, or soaring or flying. And this one was in trees or bushes. So I'll select that, click next. And voila, there's my bird. That's what it came up with based on the data that I gave it by answering those questions. So I would click, this is my bird. And it'll say, congratulations, you identified the painted bunting. So from here, I can click explore species details if I want to learn a little bit more about that bird. I can click the sound if I want to hear it, or I can ID another bird if I want to move on to something else. But for this one, I clicked explore species details, which will go to this page with a lot of information about the species. Here you see what an adult male looks like, and it gives you a little background information describing what the bird looks like and a little bit about its behavior. And if you actually have this on your phone, you can swipe on the pictures. Like if you swipe left, it'll show you more pictures of that species, and it can show you what females look like. It'll show you what juveniles look like of certain species. Sometimes it'll show you the habitat for that species if it's associated with a particular habitat. So it's good to scroll through those pictures sometimes, because that first picture may or may not be what you saw for a species. And I think that's important to remember, because some birds molt and they look like an entirely different bird at different times of the year. So if you suspect something, just remember to swipe through and see if you can match what you saw to the picture. Also down at the bottom, you can play sounds for that particular bird. For the painted bunting, it shows song, calls, and flight calls. For some other species, it'll show you maybe different subspecies of that bird. It'll describe the calls a little bit, because some birds just have multiple calls. but you can play each one, see if it sounds right, or if you're suspecting you heard a certain bird, you can play the sound and see if it matches up. You can also look at the map for the species down at the bottom. It will show you if they're year-round, migrating, or during breeding or non-breeding seasons. So you see for the painted bunting, we have it here in Florida as it's migrating and non-breeding and a little bit during breeding. But this will again vary per species. Merlin also has a photo ID feature, excuse me. And this picture right here is a picture that my husband took when we were birding up in Pennsylvania. So if I'm going to use the photo ID feature, this is how it would work. So I'd go back to the main page for the Merlin app. I click photo ID. And once you click photo ID, it will pop up like this and will say take photo or choose photo. So if you haven't already taken the photo, you can go ahead and do it then. But in this case, we had already taken the photo. So I click choose photo. And then it will ask you to zoom in until your bird fills the box. So just get it as best you can. And you see here, I've cropped it down, and then I'll click next. You also want to confirm the location and date when you took the photograph. Again, this was in Pennsylvania in May. And if you don't remember at all, you can click, I don't know. But if you can narrow it down, this will help it ID the bird for you. Next thing you'll do is click identify. And this will show up as a tree swallow, which was the correct identification. So I click, this is my bird. And it'll say congratulations again. But say, for example, it wasn't. I'll go back to this screen. It says can't find your bird. You can try adjusting your answers, and you can edit that further down the screen. You can also do this on the just regular what's my bird tool that I showed you just a second ago. If you want to alter some of the criteria, it might give you a little bit of different answers. So if you're having trouble finding your bird, just keep playing around with it a little bit. Okay, so that's Merlin. I use Merlin a lot, especially in the field, because if I'm suspecting that I heard a certain bird, I can quickly use the Explore tool and search for that bird species and play the sounds, for example, or if I'm a little unclear what a bird looks like at a certain time of year, I can type in that species and scroll over until I see pictures of that bird and compare what I saw to those pictures, and will help me validate what I saw, or it could even lead me in a total different direction. So very, very useful tool if you don't want to carry around a field guide out there. It's a quick and easy way to figure out what birds you're seeing. But it's not the only app that does that. There are some other useful apps that you can use. Audubon has a really good one. You will have to create an Audubon account and download the field guide data so you can use it offline in case you don't have good phone service where you're going. You can search as a search guide. You can use the bird ID feature. You can explore. You can add sightings, view a mobile field guide, and view data that you have logged, very similar to how eBird and Merlin operate. And this is what it looks like when you log in. The screen on the left is the home page. I believe it shows a barred owl right now, actually. If you click on bird ID, you can add in these filters. It's kind of similar to how Merlin had that 5-step process, but here you just click on the buttons and you can add your data to narrow down what bird you saw. And then we'll show you the possible matches down at the bottom. And we'll say, for example, that I saw this red bird in North Carolina in the summer, which obviously I'm showing to the right now. But if I click on the species at the bottom, it'll come up with a species profile, which is over here to the right. And I will walk you through what this app will look like once you click on that species. So my bird was a summer tanager. You can scroll down, it'll give you the descriptions, all kinds of songs that it does, different calls. It'll have the range map again, and we'll show you the breakdown of what that is. It'll tell you where they migrate, their conservation status, or any important details about it, the habitat that you would see it in, how it feeds, what it eats, their nesting. It'll even tell you about the eggs and stuff. If you click on sightings, it'll show you nearby sightings from where you were. And you can click up and it will show you a list of all those spots. And the right tab is similar species. So say that just wasn't what I was looking for. These are some other likely options that I could have seen. So in functionality, it's very similar to Merlin. And eBird, you can add your observations with this as well. It just looks a little different, but that's another extremely good app. There are additional apps that you can use. Sibley has a good one that you have to pay for. It's $20. Smart Bird ID, not bad. I've used it a little bit. It's free. And iBird Pro and iBird Lite, I don't use very often, but they're also helpful. It kind of depends on your preferences and what you're comfortable with. So whatever works best for you, go ahead and use it. For me, I use Merlin and eBird the most, Audubon right after that. And they're both free, so I didn't have to spend anything on it, which is super nice. But there are many good apps out there. Again, that's just what I find most useful. Okay, so that's it for me. And here is my contact information. If you have any questions I can't answer right now, if you want to look at my eBird list, there's my username and you can see what I've done. Here, you'll type in by county.
Yeah.
And then you can go here and see all these different hotspots. Again, the warmer the color, the hotter that hotspot is. So out of these, I'd probably want to go to one that's green or green to yellow. So like over here, Pelican Island.
On the main page, it'll tell you all about the species. I kind of wanted to get that. You can't find that. Huh?
Oh, I see.
Where
What
you
you're talking about.
have the list of hotspots at the bottom.
Yeah.
Try again, just Indian River. You should. Oh, submit under Explore. Try under Explore. Yeah. Now put in Indian River there. It should come up. Yeah, there it is.
What was not working for me earlier.
Yeah. Okay, now
Yeah.
go down to the bottom right corner. So the people's recent
There you
visit.
go. There's the hotspots.
Hotspots. And you can
Say I want to click on one, like Sebastian Inlet State Park.
Yeah, but you could also go to the list on the left and see what's been recently cited, and by whom and where. And
you can also like click on these people's checklist and see what they saw.
Yeah. So that's a very useful page to really find what's being cited today, or, it'll be yesterday. This is the 20th. And Carolyn Semino, she went to, you can see where she went. And go down with since the migration is the warblers, let's see what warblers she saw. Move on down because it's in the order of
taxonomy.
Yeah, I think so.
And then it goes by most recent sightings too.
Right. I think
there's a few warblers here.
Right. So yesterday, these are the warblers that were seen: the black and white, Parula, black-throated blue. All of these are in the parks now, coming through. And if you get on tomorrow, the same page, you'll see a lot more that were listed in this county.
So say like Parulas. If I wanted to figure that out too, I can also go to their specific species profile and it'll show that there. And again, you have that bar chart, so you know when they're going to be most likely to be seen.